Ted Puritan, Dean of the School of Graduate Studies at the American University in Cairo, Mr. Karim AbdelGhani, Regional Program Coordinator from ITU, Dr. Monica Duham, and Mr. Shadi Abou-Zahra, facilitators and experts of this workshop, representatives of disability people's organizations, members of the organizing team, partners, friends, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ITU's Arab Regional Office and UNESCO's Regional Bureau of Sciences in the Arab States, as well as on my own behalf, I'd like to welcome you to this Web Accessibility Training Workshop. This workshop is being organized in the framework of the ITU UNESCO Regional ICT Accessibility Week. And again, I'd like to express our great pleasure and also our gratitude to our host, the American University in Cairo, for hosting this event on the campuses. Also, of course, to the other partners, the NPRA, the MCIT Ministry of Communication and Information Technologies, the ICT Trust Fund, who helped to make this event possible. Now, this week is a joint effort by ITU and UNESCO, supported by our partners, to support the celebration of UNESCO's International Day for Universal Access to Information, which is commemorated on the 28th of September, and to advance the implementation of the World Telecommunications Development Conference's Arab Regional Initiative, ensuring access to telecommunications and ICTs, in particular for persons with disabilities. Now, this year is the first time that ITU and UNESCO have organized this Regional ICT Accessibility Week for Arab states. And I must say we're quite pleased with the support and interest that this event has attracted. We have also activities taking place in another 8 countries, Algeria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Tunisia. I think this is very reflective of the high level of political support that Arab states have shown in support of issues related to people with disabilities. We have in this region something like 18 countries which have already acceded to the 2006 Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. At the same time, however, there is still room for progress. We have fairly limited statistical information on the situation, the conditions of people with disabilities, and it is our hope that by bringing together various stakeholders, as we're doing here today, exchanging, this week can help to provide more information on an empirical basis, giving a better empirical understanding of the situation of people with disabilities in Arab states. Now, the World Health Organization estimates that 15% of the population of the world, or some 1 billion persons, have a disability. Now, according to the World Bank statistics for 2016, the Arab region has a population of 406 million persons. So if we think about it, the number of persons in the world with a disability is actually something like 2.5 times the number of persons living in all 22 Arab states. Think about that. 1 billion persons, 2.5 times the number of persons living in the 22 Arab states. So this is really phenomenal. There's really a great need for us to do more and to address this very important segment of our population. If we think about the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, these are a set of international commitments which are hoping to address social, economic, and environmental challenges that we're facing. 5 of these goals are specifically addressed to persons with disabilities. We see also that persons with disabilities are often excluded from the educational system. And not surprisingly, the participation in the labor market is also lower than that for the general population. And together, these 2 factors conspire to create a situation where people with disabilities tend to be often living in poverty. So we need to find a way to break these sort of vicious cycles and again, really give attention to inclusion if we really are going to meet these sustainable development commitments. Now, we're also living in a world where every day we're hearing terms like the information society, the knowledge economy, knowledge society, the digital economy, and so on. So these terms refer to this paradigm in which the ability to participate and use digital networks and platforms, such as the internet, and to apply information and communication technologies to manage and transform data, information, and knowledge are becoming the most important sources of social, economic, and even political value creation. We're seeing also the adoption of ICT across all fields in developed and also developing countries. And this is a trend which is really accelerating. However, unless we really explicitly think about and ensure that these ICT tools and networks incorporate design features and standards that allow persons with disabilities to use them, we'll simply just be erecting a new set of digital communities from which persons with disabilities are being excluded. So it is really important when we talk about inclusion, accessibility in these issues, to note that the features, many of these accessibility features, they're not just making the lives of persons with disabilities better, they're also helping all users. And so I think we need to think of accessibility features as part of improving the overall user experience in using ICTs. Now, today's workshop is about raising awareness of accessibility barriers to the use of technologies. We're hoping that through this session we can equip you with some of the knowledge, the ability, and the technical guidelines to make the digital resources that you create and use, like websites, more friendly, more welcoming, and more usable. We also want to address issues like internal policies, workflow within organizations, and so on. And it is our hope that at the end of this two-day course, you will know what is web accessibility. You will also be very familiar with web content accessibility standards, the implementation, the validation, and you will be well equipped to move forward within your organizations to look at how you can integrate this knowledge into the day-to-day work of your organization. Now, at this point, I'd like to introduce the three presenters who will be animating this session, this workshop today and tomorrow. And our first presenter, I would describe him as a diligent architect and a tireless driving force behind the organization of this ITU UNESCO Regional Accessibility Week. And this person is none other than Mr. Karim AbdelGhani. And Karim comes with experience of around 15 years in information and communication technologies, specifically in the area of international relations. Throughout these years, he's worked for the Ministry of Communication and Information Technologies of Egypt, the International Finance Corporation, excuse me, and the ITU. Karim is a Chevening Scholar and received a master's degree in international development from the University of Birmingham in 2009. Moreover, he's currently the program coordinator in the ITU Arab Regional Office, where he coordinates with stakeholders on key regional issues such as mobile health, smart learning, Arab digital content, ICT applications, digital financial inclusion, ICT indicators, big data, ICT accessibility for persons with disabilities, among other issues. Now, during the workshop, Karim will be presenting the experiences of the National Capacity Building Program, Internet for All. Our second presenter will be Mr. Shadi Abou-Zahra, who is based in Vienna, Austria. And so I'd really like to thank Shadi for traveling here from Vienna to share with us his expertise. Incidentally, Shadi is also Egyptian, so I think for him it's probably a great pleasure to be home and to share some of the wealth of experience that he has accumulated. So Shadi is an accessibility strategy and technology specialist with the Wide Web Consortium's Web Accessibility Initiative. Shadi coordinates accessibility priorities in the W3C strategy team and also supports international promotion, coordination, and harmonization of web accessibility standards. Shadi is the Web Accessibility Initiative liaison with key stakeholders such as disability, research, and standards organizations. He also coordinates the Web Accessibility Initiative's outreach across Europe, supports accessibility evaluation techniques, and European-funded projects on accessibility. Shadi has a long track record as a participant in various expert panels at the national, regional, and international level, including the World Summit on the Information Society and its Internet Governance Forum. He's also participated in various expert working groups and provided consultancy services to ITU, UNESCO, and other intergovernmental organizations. During the course, Shadi will be presenting international standards for digital accessibility and processes for validating web accessibility. Now, our last speaker, Dr. Monica Duhem, comes from Mexico, and today she has the pleasure of being the rose among the thorns, bringing some gender balance to today's session. So Dr. Monica Duhem, she's the founder and CEO of Peer Colors, a Mexican organization aimed at fostering digital inclusion by supporting education and the creation of accessible digital content for people with disabilities. Monica has more than 15 years of experience in the telecommunications and information and communication technology sector. As a telecommunications expert, the Mexican Ministry of Communications appointed her from 2011 to 2014 as a rapporteur to ITU's working group on accessibility of telecommunications for ICTs and persons with disabilities. Monica has led accessibility projects in organizations such as the Mexican Supreme Court, several telecommunication operators, and one of Mexico's biggest digital media firms. She has served as an advisor to the Mexican government on major national accessibility initiatives, including providing expert advice to the Office of the President during the elaboration of the Digital Accessibility Guidelines. Monica has a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from the Universidad Ibero-Americana, a master's degree in Economics and Philosophy from the London School of Economics, and a PhD in Social and Political Science from the Universidad Ibero-Americana. During the course of the workshop, Monica will be focusing on designing and developing accessible websites and development of accessible digital content. So, at this point, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Karim to lead the first session. And I invite you all to be edified and enjoy this workshop. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Paul, for the very elaborate introduction. I want to start by, first of all, commending the great collaboration with UNESCO to organize this ICT Accessibility Week. It's the first time we organize such a very, a whole week full of, just dedicated for ICT accessibility in the Arab region, which I think is a big achievement for us, and I hope that in the future we can build on it. I also want to thank the AUC for being our strategic partner and hosting the workshops in Egypt. We do have other events taking place in other countries in the Arab region, but we appreciate very much AUC's role in taking the lead in the events taking place in Egypt. So without further ado, I want to jump right into the purpose of this workshop, web accessibility. This workshop comes as part of an ITU program on this topic. It's called the National Web Accessibility Program. So, in short, accessibility, obviously, in physical accessibility in public places and so on and so forth, has seen a lot of advancements in that area internationally. However, online, the situation is quite different. 9 out of 10 internet websites are still not accessible for persons with disabilities. There are no ramps for the digital space, so to speak. The main reason for this digital gap lies in the fact that there's very poor knowledge on what is web accessibility and how do you achieve it. And also, governments are not buying accessible websites. Developers and content creators do not know what web accessibility standards exist and that products and services have accessible features. The solution we propose is basically a worldwide program to help improve the environment in that area. This worldwide program is in line with international stipulations such as the Connect 2020 agenda on global telecommunications, ICT and development, which includes the need to create enabling environments ensuring accessible telecommunications and ICT for persons with disabilities in all countries by 2020. Also, the UN Convention on Human Rights the UN Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities, Article 9 and 30 clearly indicate the need for ICT accessibility. The work done in ITU as a member of the UN family, specifically the development sector in the ITU on digital inclusion, by the members of the ITU on question 7.1, which is one of the study groups, one of the areas focused in the study groups in that sector, relates to access to telecommunications and ICT services by persons with disabilities with specific needs. And the resource based mainly is, or the reference mainly that the ITU uses is a report that was issued by the ITU called the Model ICT Accessibility Policy Report. The impact on socio-economic development of web accessibility is obviously something that is tangible, and you can see the benefits directly of it. We can move on. So by making accessible more websites, who are we targeting? As Paul highlighted in his speech, there is over 1 billion persons with disabilities in the world today, according to the WHO. If we account for the elderly as well, people aged over 65, currently there's around 617 million elderly who have switched into the category of persons with disabilities. And if we project that to the year to 2050, it is estimated that that number would reach to 1.6 billion, and that's the elderly segment only. So in short, there is a need for something like this, and the demand for it will rise. Currently there's a huge demand, but even the demand will rise even greater in the future. So how about is this global program implemented? The ITU is basically, as I mentioned, is one of the UN specialized agencies on ICTs. It's part of the UN family. I think it's one of the oldest organizations in the world, by the way. One of the oldest UN organizations in the world. Previously, it was the International Telegraph Union, which was launched in 1876, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, we have the mandate to focus on areas related to ICTs, including including ICT accessibility. Fortunately, the ITU has membership of governments and non-government members. So most of the all of the governments in the world in the UN family are members of the ITU, as well as we have around 800 what we call sector members, who are non-governmental actors. They include private sector companies, they include international regional organizations, they include civil society, and they include academia. So through this consortium of multi-stakeholders, we will work with them, with all these partners, to implement this program. Hopefully, what we want to achieve is that within the next 4 years, a total of 20 countries will be visited to implement this program in 5 regions: America, Europe, the Arab region, and the Asia Pacific region. We started with the Arab region in this workshop. This workshop is sort of a condensed version of the whole program, and we hope to, in the coming years, to deliver more elaborate versions of this program in different countries across the region. So the national program consists mainly of 5 components. The governmental commitment, training in accessible digital content, technical training to develop accessible websites, self-sustainable model for inclusion of persons with disabilities, and national leadership and model to follow. I will go through each of them right now. So the first component is government commitment, and mainly what we wanted through this is to raise awareness among government officials and get their buy-in and empower them to take a leading role to push web accessibility, particularly in government, for government websites. By that, we're targeting mainly ministers of ICTs, education, health, etc., all the ministries, governmental ministries, telecommunications operators, university deans, civil society organizations, persons with disabilities representatives, industry, and amongst others. So this segment of this training in the program, I will be delivering a presentation about it tomorrow in the high-level symposium, mainly because the audience there will be the target officials that we're targeting for this. The second part of the program is a training in accessible digital content. And by that, we hope that everyone who's producing digital content in this ecosystem is aware about the measures they need to take to make their content accessible for persons with disabilities. And by these stakeholders, we're targeting governmental representatives, university professors, NGOs, persons with disability representatives, and everyone else in this digital content ecosphere. Also, what we're focusing on is how that participants will learn how to use accessibility validators of Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Adobe's PDF documents, as well as the accessibility functionalities found in social networks such as Facebook and Twitter and other platforms. The third part is a technical training, mainly targeting web developers. And in that, we want to raise awareness for web developers and to hopefully train them on how to on the standards that they need to stick to make accessible websites. So mainly by these guidelines and standards, we're referring to WCAG 2.0 levels A, AA, and AAA. And we're targeting mainly technicians from universities, members of the ITU who will be trained to develop accessible websites. And hopefully by creating more web developers who are, or by training more web developers who are able to technically to prepare technical websites, this will empower everyone, all the other stakeholders who want to prepare accessible websites, such as government websites and also and so forth. The fourth component of the program is basically that this is as a self-sustainable model. ITU will be training the trainers for this to train more, and will create a certification program with the government, and hopefully the revenues of that will be used in a fund to help train and raise awareness among persons with disabilities on how they can use assistive technologies and other relevant matters. So as you can see, it is a very coherent and very self-sustainable model. Hopefully we can achieve this in the countries that we're working. Finally, we want to create an enabling accessible environment. Through all these components put together and through the partnership with all the partners, we hope that the environment that we build for web accessibility in those countries is one that is enabling for more websites and web and digital content to be accessible. I just want to highlight that this workshop in Egypt is the second one, the second pilot sort of. The first pilot took place in Costa Rica, where a training was done in March 2017, funded by the government and implemented by the ITU. The training program on web accessibility was organized in collaboration with the ministry, as well as the CTEL, the regulator, and an organization on persons with disabilities, and the university. So as you can see, we're targeting a multi-stakeholder approach to deliver the training program. We can have the government, regulator, academia, and others. The results of this implementation of the program for Web for All in Costa Rica, the Costa Rica government committed to organize more training workshops and transform all public websites in a short period of time. The continuation of a national certification in web accessibility to generate income for a fund to be used to train persons with disabilities in Costa Rica to use assistive technologies and to learn to surf the internet, promoting digital inclusion and socio-economic development. And then finally, the training and certification, the IT certification. 44 persons were trained or to be trained in accessible digital content, and 20 developers capable to create accessible websites. So through this program, we hope that we kickstarted a long journey in Costa Rica to transform all the websites to be accessible, and we hope that this Costa Rican experience will be replicated in all the countries that we will work with. So this is in short the highlight of this training program that you will be participating in today and the remaining and the second half of tomorrow. And hopefully you can be our pioneers in the future to transforming Egyptian websites to be more accessible in the future. Thank you. So now I think I give the floor to Monica to start the training program. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning. I thought it was you who was going to... Let me just, first of all, introduce Shadi, he's the expert of the representative of the W3C and an expert on accessibility. So he can just address some of the issues that we're going to see this morning and part of the afternoon. So I would like to give first, if you don't mind, Karim, the floor to Shadi, and then we'll go into what web accessibility policy is. Thank you.
Okay, so the mic is working. Good morning. A little bit of accessibility issues, so just setting up. Let's test how this works. Great. Okay. Started. Okay, looking good. So good morning, everyone. My name is Shadi Abou-Zahra. I work for the Wide Web Consortium. As was mentioned earlier, I come from Egypt, but I lived abroad. I was raised in Austria, mainly. Just a second. Let's see better. Okay, let's give it another try. Am I still audible?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, I was raised in Vienna, Austria, more or less, as a young boy. We moved to Austria, but I come frequently to Egypt, and it's really a pleasure to see that there is some development and some movement in the area of accessibility. I think also from an NGO, social entrepreneurship level, there's activity, recently also interest from government level, which I think is really a positive sign. So I really want to just set the stage. Monica will go into much more detail in the training, in some of the technical aspects. And she and I'll be later on in the day again to show you some of the checking and some of the evaluation aspects. We were thinking a bit more technical, but maybe also we can give you something that you can take back for developers or for others that you know of. And also if you are working for disability organizations, that you understand what the matter is and you can try to communicate this. And so we will be working together on delivering this. Today was mentioned the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. W3C is an international standards body, very young in comparison to ITU and very small. We're about 60 staff members from around the world. It was founded in 1999 by Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of the World Wide Web, actually. And so our core mission is to develop the standards of the web, to keep evolving the web. If you remember, many years ago, the web was very static, very plain. Today it's very interactive. There's much more that you can do on the web. And this continuous evolution of the web is our core aspect. But an integral part of the web is to make sure that it's international, that it covers different languages, that it addresses accessibility for everyone. It's really one of the core principles of the web, that it can work on any device. You just take out your phone, your computer, whatever it is, and the web works. And that's a major accomplishment. In the digital world, we actually see the web as one of the core aspects of the digital era. This is also why very often the web and the internet are used as synonyms. Technically, the internet is the physical connection between the computer, and the web is actually an application on the internet. But the web has become so dominant and so much universal interface that other technologies like television, telephony, radio, whatever it is, all these are converging onto the web. So the illustration that I'm projecting right now shows on the one side all the different types of hardware, all the different kinds of devices that are connecting onto the internet. You can see that it's already a few years old, this image, because it doesn't show fridges and cars and all sorts of things that are becoming internet connected and are becoming part of this digital society. It's not only the tablets and the mobile phones and the computers, it's really essentially everything is becoming digital and nowadays. On the other side of the image, the high level part, you can see all the sectors that this is going into. Things like was mentioned already, healthcare, entertainment, digital publishing. It keeps slipping down, so. Software distribution. I think software, meanwhile, is completely different than what used to be by having software as a service. And all this, the core part is the web, what we call the open web platform, which is becoming the universal interface for many of these applications. So, in this whole aspect, one of the important things and our focus for today is people with disabilities. How does this impact people with disabilities? On the one side, it's a huge enabler. Having access to education, to online education, having access to employment, to research, all these things are potentially available. But at the same time, we talk about the digital divide. And particularly the UN organizations have been very active here for many years, trying to address the digital divide. Initially, this was thought of the separation between those who can afford digital technology and those who cannot. But it has been broadened to many other societal aspects, including child protection and youth, women, and technology. But last but not least, of course, also accessibility for people with disabilities. It was mentioned before, the WHO statistics on 15% of the world's population. And I think this is really, I want to underline that, that it's a really vast number, sometimes quoted as the world's largest minority. Another aspect that was also mentioned, but that I also want to underline is that we're all aging, and with age, we're thankfully aging, and we develop age-related impairments as we age. This is another very important issue that it affects all of us sooner or later, whether it's by birth or acquired. But very often we all have to live with disabilities for some period. And finally, one of the important things is that accessibility aspects often benefit these who are already socially marginalized. Those are already impacted by lower education, lower social status. These things multiply and become even more important. So it's a responsibility. It's what we need to do to address. But these are all figures and numbers and abstract, and I want to try to make it a little bit more personal. So I want to introduce some people that I've really had the pleasure of meeting through the course of my life. This is Deborah. This is already many years ago. This photo was taken at the Assistive Technology Lab in the University of Madison in Wisconsin in the US. Deborah has cerebral palsy, so she has limited, she can hardly control the movements of her arms and legs, but she can move her head And with a head stick that was mounted on, she types the computer and has access and was able to study and complete her degree. So we need to consider the aspects of physical accessibility. How well can you use the computer using just one stick, typing one letter at a time. Hearing disabilities is another very important issue. We have increasing amount of video and audio content on the web with the expansion of broadband. But many people are excluded. Some people may be able to hear, but still they have to focus so hard, they have to concentrate so hard to hear that it becomes really tedious and really difficult to follow, let's say, an online education course by audio if it doesn't have captions on. I've had the pleasure of meeting Professor Stephen Hawkins one day at MIT. He was presenting, and I think everybody in the room may know him, a gift to the world, and he has a speech impairment. He cannot speak, he types into the computer and his computer speaks for him. Now imagine having to call the call center, a telephone line with automated phone service, right? How do these aspects actually work for such disabilities? People with cognitive disabilities. Luz Rello is a personal friend of mine, a researcher in the field of dyslexia. As a child, she had a lot of trouble in school because with her dyslexia, her mind plays tricks on her. The letters get confused, the numbers get confused, but she's actually really, really smart. And only through computer technology, she found that when she can change the font, when she can change how the text is presented, she can actually read the text much easier. And she was able to complete her computer science degree and linguistics degree. She has a double degree, double major, and is now a researcher in the field of dyslexia, has a spin-off company where she tries to provide software solutions for people with dyslexia and people with other types of learning disabilities. Blindness, this is in India, a telecall center where they are trying to promote employment for women with disabilities in this Cash for Work program. The idea here is these blind young ladies, they have, on the 1 year, they have a customer calling who needs help. And on the other year, they have a computer talking to them, reading aloud what's on the screen, and they're helping the customer fill out the form or do whatever the customer needs to do. So it's really amazing to see how the mind is able to process 2 streams of sound at the same time and to effectively use that, again, supported by computer. But blindness, just like deafness, is the minority in that field of disability. Many, many more people have low vision and different types of low vision. This is Andrew here. Andrew has only peripheral sight, so he only sees around the fringes. He doesn't see in the center. He has to look very closely at the computer. But there are many different sorts, and I think Monica may be also introducing some of these aspects. At least they are in her slides that you can look at. So this is what we're talking about. These are the people that we're trying to make those websites accessible for. And it's more than just websites. We're trying to make technology overall, because it's all converging. You now pick up your phone, you tap something on the screen, you don't know if it's accessing a website or what's accessing at the back, and you don't care. You don't need to. It just needs to work. And that's what we're focusing on. I want to try to play a video and show also not only the accessibility aspects, how they impact directly people's disabilities, but the further benefits that this has for everyone. I often compare this to the elevator or the so-called electronic curb cut. I need a curb cut to get onto the pavement, but everybody uses a curb cut when they're pushing a trolley, when they have a pram, child with a pram, or the same with the elevator. Everybody uses an elevator. Nobody thinks of it as an assistive technology. It's part of what's every day. And this is where we need to get to with the accessibility features. They need to be so built in, born accessible, that everybody uses them without even thinking that there are accessibility features. Let's see if that works. We have a page, and by the way, our resources are freely available on the net, so you're always able to go and use them and promote them. We also always look forward to translations. So what we developed is a series of 10 videos. Each of these videos shows a specific accessibility feature and the benefit of that feature to not only to people with disabilities, but to the broader audience. And they're very short videos. The entire compilation, all 10 of them, are only 7 minutes long. But I won't play them all. I will just play maybe a selection, 1 or 2. Let's see which ones. Any preferences? Let's try clear layout and design. I think we've all seen websites that are difficult to use, that are difficult to understand. And I'll turn on full screen. And actually, let me, let me play first the video, and then I'll play the audio described version of that to show you also the accessibility aspects here. So this one has captions. I'll also turn on here the transcripts, and let's try. See if that works.
Accessibility perspectives, clear layout and design. Poor layout can be very frustrating. And the same applies to good design involves good layout, and that.
Okay. Let's try to make this louder. Okay.
Web accessibility perspectives, clear layout and design. Poor layout can be very frustrating. And the same applies to the web. Good design involves good layout, and that means a better user experience. This includes clear headings, navigation bars, and consistent styling. Any web user will get frustrated with bad layout and design. Complex layouts also make finding information difficult or impossible for people with visual disabilities. And they are confusing for people with cognitive and learning disabilities who need clarity and consistency of the presentation. Bad design also impacts anyone who isn't particularly confident around computers. Web accessibility. Essential for some, useful for all. Visit w3.org/WAI/perspectives for more information on clear layout and design.
So the idea here is, and I think we've all seen websites that are complex and too difficult to use, but imagine somebody who has very low vision or is only seeing a very small portion of the screen at a time and is trying to navigate this really complex site. It becomes even more difficult. Imagine somebody with a cognitive disability trying to understand what's happening here on the site. What do I need to do? So all these things coming together, what we call universal design, taking the cross disability needs, combining them and trying to address them collectively. I'll create the audio description version just for the audience. And I think also, I love audio described versions. last time I was watching Lord of the Rings with audio description, and you understand so much more of the movie than without. So once more with audio descriptions.
Web accessibility perspectives, clear layout and design. Poor layout can be very frustrating.
A man in a kitchen is looking for things to make a coffee.
And the same applies to the web. Good design involves good layout, and that means a better user experience.
The man is frustrated about not finding what he is looking for. The man rearranges the kitchen in a time lapse.
This includes clear headings, navigation bars, and consistent styling.
The man is now browsing a badly laid out pizza delivery website and is shaking his head.
Any web user will get frustrated with bad layout and design.
A woman is using the same complex website with screen magnification. She only sees a portion of the screen at a time, so the website appears even more confusing.
Complex layouts also make finding information difficult or impossible for people with visual disabilities.
The woman is shaking her head and is unable to use that website.
And they are confusing for people with cognitive and learning disabilities who need clarity and consistency of the presentation.
The man calls a friend over to help. The friend is just as confused and navigates to a different, better piece of website.
Bad design also impacts anyone who isn't particularly confident around computers.
This second website is much clearer and easier to use. They are both happy. The woman using screen magnification has also used that website and is delightfully eating a pizza.
Web accessibility, essential for some, useful for all.
So again, let me switch back. How do I switch back to the presentation mode? So, it's the same video. It's the same video. What's like, making something accessible doesn't mean it has to be bad. Doesn't mean it has to be a back entrance through the kitchen. I mean, there are benefits of having back entrance through the kitchen. I get to see what I'm being served, and I decide if I want to eat there or not. But seriously, the idea is you can make the same website, you can make the same content accessible if you consider it from the start and if you plan for it accordingly. In the training later today, we'll be going into more depth into the technical aspect, really what does this mean. But just to give you a little bit of examples, you need to make sure that all functionality is available through keyboard. Keyboard is really important. For people who cannot use a mouse, for example, but also for people who are using voice input for all sorts of reasons. The keyboard interface is what's used by assistive technology very often. So this is something essential. And this is something you can test on your favorite website very easily. Just put away the mouse, try the tab button, try to see can you use that website using just the keyboard, see if it works or if it doesn't. It's not a full accessibility test, but it's an indication. You can get a bit of an idea. Adequate information and informative headings. So, when you start reading the newspaper or any document, you don't read everything from A to Z. You look at the headings, you make a mental map of what's the information here in this document, and when there's something interesting, you focus on that, and that's what you read. That's also how people with disabilities use websites. Screen readers that blind people use can be asked to say, let me know what the headings are on this page. And the screen reader will read out the headings. And this way a blind person will understand what's in this document, what's on this page, and then access the bits and pieces. Clear and simple layout and navigation. We just saw the example here before. I think again we've all seen websites that are too difficult to use. Sufficient colors, color contrast between foreground and background. I think a large amount of males, I think it's 3 out of 11 or something of that, have color blindness. They cannot distinguish colors. But it's also when we're using a phone in the sun, in the glare, having good clear colors. And this is where we always get in clinch with the designers who want to have some blue on blue or gray on gray or all these colors that are really difficult to read. Video captions and audio descriptions, we just saw an example of that, how helpful video captions are. Also for people with less language skills, being able to follow the captions and subtitles. Audio descriptions also help people understand what's going on. And text alternative for visual content. For example, if you have an image, you need to describe that image in the code so that it's read out loud for somebody who cannot see that content. There are many more, and we're going to go into more detail today and tomorrow. But the idea here is to think about these requirements, but think of how these requirements also benefit many more people. They're essential for people with disabilities. But think again this keyboard navigation, keyboard accessibility aspect. This is important for somebody who cannot use a mouse. But at the same time, if you're using Siri, again, it will help you. This is exactly, these are assistive technologies that have become mainstream. VoiceOver, or in Android it's called TalkBack or something. Those programs built into the operating system will read out what's on the screen, will help you provide stuff by voice. Not because so many people are disabled, but also because so many more people are using their phones when they don't have their hands free, right? I don't want to say when they're driving, because they should be. But fact is that you now navigate with your car, you ask where's the next booth, or speech input is becoming a very versatile, very strong means of interacting with ICT. So, by enlarging the user base, it is about people with disabilities. It's about making content and ICT accessible for people with disabilities. But looking at the larger benefits, the business benefits, we can also make a better case. Many years ago, I think in 2003 or 2004, Microsoft was looking at why they should make accessibility in their operating system, in the Windows operating system. And they came to the conclusion that about 15 to 20% of the population needs those accessibility features. This matches approximately the WHO statistics that we saw, so they underline many other statistics. That's the population of people with disabilities. But they found, in addition to that nearly 60% of the population benefits from these accessibility features. By being able to make text larger, by being able to hear what's on the screen, all these things. So in the new Windows versions, if you look, they don't call it accessibility anymore. They call it ease of use, to try to address a larger audience. Aging customers was mentioned also earlier. That we're all aging, and how many aging people exist in our communities. But this is a very nice white paper from SAS, a software company. And they were describing the rationale why they are doing accessibility. Not because of their public website. Their business is more to other businesses, B2B sector. But their benefit really is to retain the aging workforce that they have. As people get older, and if you want to retain them and still be as productive, you need to ensure accessibility. So they were focusing on accessibility much more on the intranet rather than on the public website. We talked about mobile design and accessibility. There's a big overlap here. For years and years, when we talked with designers, they would always want a fixed layout. You could even see websites saying optimized for 800 by 600 pixels or things like this. With the elaboration of tablets, different kinds of phones, even televisions, all these things that with which you access the internet, designers starting to understand that they need to be more flexible, that their content needs to adapt to the interfaces, not the other way around. Usability in different contexts. I think this is also a very interesting case from Boeing. Boeing used to be, that's the airplane company, they built aircraft. They were very interested in accessibility, they were very active in supporting the WAI activities here. And I always wondered why. And the reason was not because of any flight entertainment or not because of anything. They don't do that. That's the airlines that do that. They only do the aircraft. But they have the engineers trying to fix the aircraft. And they're in a very loud environment because the engine is on. So they need subtitles. Or they are trying to fix something and they only have one arm to do that. And they need to hold the manual in the other hand. So these accessibility features benefited those people in those very harsh environments. And this is why they were focusing on making their manuals for their engineers out in the wild accessible. There's also a very close relationship between accessibility and usability. Very large overlap and gray boundary between the two. Usually it's not even useful to try to distinguish the two. But the idea here is that accessibility benefits the user experience and satisfaction. And finally, it also benefits people with lower language and computer skills. So many benefits here, and there are many case studies that underline this. We had looked at this a few years ago. For example, Legal in General, that's a law firm, they made their website accessible. And they said that by doing this, they doubled the number of visitors that they have to the website. They cut the maintenance costs by 2/3, and they increased the natural search engine traffic by 50%. Now, search engine optimization is a big field. People spend a lot of money on search engine optimization. If they spend part of it on accessibility, they will get just as far. And they will benefit more people and get more benefits out of it. Tesco is a supermarket store in the UK. Many years ago, they were being threatened with a lawsuit from the Royal National Institution of the Blind in the UK. And they spent £35,000 at the time to make their website accessible, quite a large number of money. But they say that the revenue in result of that was 13 million per year. So the relations here are extraordinary. This is an extreme case because as a supermarket, when you improve user satisfaction, when you improve usability, all these aspects have a high return on investment than maybe for other websites, but it just shows that there is a return, that you can measure this in impact. CNET is an online digital magazine. When they start to provide transcripts for their online video, again, they have 30% increased traffic from search engines. Good. There are many policies around the world that are promoting accessibility because of this, because it's essential to over 1 billion people, but also because it's a social responsibility that society needs to take care of. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was mentioned earlier, and it's a huge milestone. that is impacting accessibility worldwide and making a lot of progress that we need to support. Following from that, many countries are adopting policies and legislations. Sometimes these are stronger, sometimes these are weaker, but it is something that is really important to ensure that there are adequate laws and policies to drive this innovation forward. And last but not least, several companies, several organizations get involved due to corporate social responsibility, because they feel that they have this responsibility that they need to take. I'll just check the time. Okay, I'll move on a little bit more quickly. So, looking around the room, I don't think I need to convince you about the importance of accessibility. But I hope that these might be helpful arguments here when you are talking with your developers, when you are talking with your peers, with your disability organizations and policymakers. These are the arguments that you can maybe bring forward and help try to make move this forward. So let's start transitioning and get a little bit more technical and transition into the actual training aspect. So let's talk about the underlying standards that actually enable this accessibility. What does it mean to make something accessible? We know in the built environment, we talk about ramps, we talk about elevators, and it's very analogous in ICT. In the illustration, what you have is, from the one side is a developer who's using authoring tools like content management systems or other software to produce the content. Hopefully also evaluation tools and checkers, who will be looking at this later today, to create accessible content. And in the other side, you have users who are using browsers and media players, sometimes also assistive technologies to access this content. So there's a production and a consumption workflow here that needs to be addressed. And this is applicable to most ICT. This is based on web standards, but it's the same in digital publishing. It's the same in many areas where there's a production phase and a consumption phase. Maybe in software, it's a little bit different because the operating system takes care of a lot of the authoring and the browsing aspects. These are built-in functions into the operating system. But again, more or less, it's the same. So a very simple example to illustrate that. Let's say you want to put an icon on the web. In this case, it's the logo of the Web Accessibility Initiative. You want to put it on your home page. What you see under the icon at the top is the source code, the HTML source code. And that HTML source code has the link to the image itself, called way.logo.png. And it has the so-called alt text. This is a textual description for the image, so that when somebody with a screen reader comes who cannot see this image, this text alternative is read out loud. And in that case, the text alternative is Web Accessibility Initiative logo. This is what's read out to somebody who's using Siri or who's using a screen reader for whatever reason. Now, this is what needs to be done to make this image accessible. But how do I get there? Ideally, already when the developer is uploading an image, and by developer here I mean the large base of authors. Most of the content is developed by non-technical authors. So these people need to be supported by tools like their own content management system. When they're uploading an image, it says, what's the description for that image? It only takes a few seconds, and then the content management system can provide that information accessibly online. Authoring tools is a very big field. Who here uses an authoring tool? raise your hand if you use an authoring tool. You sure you don't? Okay, you use Facebook or Twitter or any of these things? Well, you are producing content. You are using authoring tools. We forget that. Authoring tools is a very big field. All this content is being generated, is being developed. How do we make sure that this content is accessible? When you upload a video on YouTube, when you post something in a forum online, when you're interacting. So this is where authors also, the users become authors as well. This is maybe what's sometimes called the Web 2.0, this new interaction paradigm. And it's very important to remember that users are also developers. So we need to make sure that not only are these tools accessible on the interface, but that they also produce accessible content. Both of these aspects. Here in this room, I'll make a point of that. Here in this room, when the designer designed this stage, they didn't think that a person with disability could be a presenter. They're thinking in very stereotype thoughts. A person with disability is maybe a student, but a presenter? So they forgot the ramp here, even though they have ramps all around the university. So it's not that they don't know about ramps, they actually just forgot the idea that people with disabilities can also be authors, can be content providers, they can be journalists or whatever, that need to produce content and need to produce it accessibly. Good. So for the web, we have 3 sets of standards, 3 guidelines that address each of these aspects. We have the so-called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that defines what should accessible content be. And we will be looking more into the details of that later today. We also have the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines. This talks about how authoring tools like Facebook, like content management systems, like specialized software, all these tools that are used to generate content, how accessible, how to make these accessible, again, both on their own interface, but also on the content that they produce. Honestly, I think the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines is even more important than the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and I think it's a little bit unfortunate that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines has so much more emphasis or attracted so much more policy uptake. I would wish we could push the authoring tool guidelines even more and get that out even more. But last but not least is also the user agent accessibility guidelines. This describes the accessibility of browsers and media players. Let's say I have a video with captions, but my media player doesn't play these captions. And what's the point of creating these captions in the first place? So also browsers and media players need to support accessibility. And there are many issues, there are many differences between what browsers can support and not support. And unfortunately, developers spend so much of their effort, so much of their resources trying to figure out issues around bugs in browsers and media players. So people then come and say accessibility is so expensive, and we say no, it's not. It's because the browsers do all these bugs, and it's the same in web development. A lot of the web development effort is lost in bugs in browsers, so it's not only accessibility. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, as I just mentioned, is internationally recognized as the standard for accessibility, and starting to be actually used beyond web only. It's starting to be used for electronic documents, even partially for software. In 2002, ISO, the International Standards Organization, adopted WCAG 2, which is the currently operational version of WCC, as ISO 40500. It's been adopted also in Europe as part of the European standard, EN 301549. I love standards. It's also in the US Section 508, a procurement law. I'll mention these a little bit later on, to give you an idea what these different standards are, but the idea is this: it's a WTC standard that has been internationally harmonized and integrated in many, many other standards that go beyond the web alone, and is really becoming a reference. So it's a universal set of guidelines defining what are the common requirements, what are the requirements to make websites accessible. And again, we will be going, Monica in particular will be going into more detail onto that, and we're going to be looking at this in more detail. We pursue universal design approach. We try to address people with different kinds of disabilities and the cross-accessibility aspects, cross-disability aspects that are needed to include in these requirements. Very often the requirements will address several disabilities, as we mentioned with the clear layout. It's not only for people with cognitive and learning disabilities, but also for people with low vision and so on. These guidelines are developed in an open forum, in a collaborative effort. All the resources are public, anyone can comment at any time. By the way, we are currently in the development of Rule 2.1. If anybody is interested, we always welcome the involvement of users and experts, industry, and as international as possible. So, the other standards I mentioned, and I'm really coming to a close here. Just for you to be aware of, there are many, many standards. The ITU has many standards on, for instance, how telephone devices should interact with hearing aids. So, go on for days mentioning all these different standards. But I want to step really a level higher and just mention some of the standards that have a broader impact on accessibility in terms of defining more generic requirements. So the EN 31549 is a European standard. It's fairly young. It was adopted in 2014. It's now being revised. And it's a standard for accessible ICT procurement. So whenever a public agency is acquiring ICT, this could be a mobile phone, it could be a printer, it could be a website, it could be an ATM machine. Here are accessibility requirements to consider. This actually stems from the US Section 508. The US Section 508 is a procurement law and a standard at the same time. And this has proven to be really successful in the US. When government says, government is a very large purchaser, when the government says it will purchase accessible ICT or favor accessible ICT, it creates a lot of activity and a lot of movement. And right now, the EN 301, the European standard, and the Section 508 are being harmonized. There's few differences in the area of real-time text, and some other differences, but more or less they're converging and they're becoming very similar, that we have cross-Atlantic requirements that are the same. Hopefully this is also something that can be incorporated internationally. It's very important to adopt international standards rather than to reinvent the wheel. Very often there's this thought, no, in our country it's different. In our country, but what happens when you create different standards is that you lose all this know-how that you can use, all the resources, books, documentation, software, all this you have to redevelop from scratch. You lose a lot of momentum, a lot of innovation. Whereas if you build on existing standards, you can really skip ahead because you bypass a lot of the developments that others needed to go through. ISO also has a user needs summary. This is a very broad set of user requirements when they're interacting with ICT. And it's very interesting when you're coming to develop standards. And in that context, I also want to mention Guide 71, which is also a standard on how to involve accessibility in standards, in standardization. even if it's not a standard on accessibility, if you're, let's say, developing a standard on, I don't know, vending machines, this will help you include accessibility in this law, so that accessibility is considered throughout, not that you have separate accessibility standards and separate standards that produce inaccessible ICTs. So as I said, I could go on speaking for days about standards. This is my specialty. But what I really want to say to close is, even though it's about standards, and standards are what make things connect and make things measurable at the end, it's really about people. Don't forget the people. We shouldn't forget that. Make sure you're engineers. Don't forget the people. We see that very often, well-intended solutions, but that really don't work in practice. Here, an illustration. I've met such situations very often. It's a ramp. The engineer built a ramp. But it's way too steep, so the person with the wheelchair cannot use it. And there's somebody pushing, and there's another person lifting, and there's a third person carrying the stuff of that person in the wheelchair. And there's a fourth person watching. And all this inefficiency, because the ramp is not built correctly, because we didn't think about the user first, but we just went ahead and did something that doesn't meet the needs of the user. So with that, thank you, and I will hand back again to Monica. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was told that there was going to be a coffee break, so I don't know if I don't see the. Well, we can. Can you just? Thank you.
Ask if we are sure.
Yes, can you? So we're just going to ask if we're going to have a coffee break, because they told me that at 11:30 we were going to have a coffee break. But mainly I wanted to thank Shadi, and what we're going to do next from now to 5 o'clock, even though we'll have coffee and lunch, don't worry. So we're going to talk about those standards and how to implement the standards. So I wanted to know if you, here we have developers, are some of you developers? Could the developers here raise their hands? So we do not have developers here. So what we're going to do, since you're a developer, very good. We have one developer, so for you it's going to be very, very interesting. So what we're going to do is, we're going to talk about the standards. We're going to talk about WCAT, which is the Web Content Developer Standard that is being used everywhere to set the minimum accessibility conditions that all our developments should meet, so everyone can surf the net. No? So we're going to start with the presentation. I don't know if we're going to have. Well, so we're going to talk about the standards. I don't know if you, the developer in the room, do you use WCAT, and are you used to do accessible websites or not? So what we're going to do, so you're an expert. So we have 2 experts, and all the rest are not developers. So I'm not going to do a very technical presentation, even though you can have the technical presentation in Arabic and in English as well. What we're going to do is I'm going to tell you what are the standards, why the standards are important, what are the results coming from those standards, and how you can check if a website is accessible or not. With the help of Shadi, what we're going to do is show you some testing tools to see if a website is accessible or not. So I was just waiting for the presentation. I don't know if we're going to have a presentation. We were going to have the English version in here. So I can follow the Arab one? No, that's the other one. That's the one. Exactly. Thank you. And here's the click for that one. Perfect. So I'm not going to repeat what Shadi just told you, but accessibility is a human right. No, in the digital world that we are living, every time we have more and more activities that we're obliged, not even want to, but obliged to do in the internet. In the case of Mexico, for instance, where I'm come from, for paying your taxes, you're obliged to pay your taxes through the application of the Ministry of Finance. So if you do not have internet, if you do not have a connection, you cannot pay your taxes. But what about if the website is not accessible? What about if I'm a blind person? So I should be exempt of paying taxes because the website is not accessible. So the accessibility is a human right, and in digital economy, it's even more important. It's taking much more importance in being accessible, no? So, and I'm not going to talk about the process and who we are benefiting with the accessibility, but in all our countries, we have more and more laws and regulation on web accessibility. So in the UN, as we just were presented, there's these new standards through all the European Union about accessibility, but those standards are now being used and being put in place in all other countries. In Mexico, for instance, we have regulations now that oblige websites to be inaccessible, but also through Latin America country as well. Now we have policies and regulation on web accessibility. And the regulations now are focused on the government. Why? Because the government is such an economic actor. If the purchasing power of the government, if they have the obligation to have accessible website, then the economy will follow. We will have more developers attentive to that demand that will offer accessible websites. But the reality is that we need to not convince, but we need to invite private companies, private services to have accessible websites. So what is accessibility in ICTs? We have accessibility functionalities, assistive technologies that we can find in nowadays almost every software. Every operating systems have accessibility functionalities, which means that persons that cannot have a speaking disability or vision disability or a mobility disability will have an technology or an assistive technology that will help them to surf the net. So we have, as we said, we have video description, we have all those functionalities that will help everyone to surf the net. On the policy part in order to do policies, we have the ITU had developed some reports to help countries to create policies on accessibility. So we have accessible television, which is a policy report, a model policy report to show countries how to make policies in order to foster an accessible television environment. We have the same for mobile and phone services, as well as ICT accessibility report. So I really invite policymakers to use these tools, to read these policy reports in order to be able to have best practice around the world and create policies that foster accessibility. But now we're going to talk specifically about web accessibility. So what web accessibility is, and it's important that we distinguish between what assistive technologies are and what content accessibility is. Assistive technologies is Siri, is all those functionalities that are developed, and the amazing thing is that we can have it for free once we purchase an apparatus. We purchase a tool, we purchase a telephone. So most of the operative systems in these tablets, smartphones, and computers that we're buying nowadays do have in their operative systems assistive tools. No, they have free softwares, that screen readers that will read, free magnifiers that will help you if you have low vision to read the content and to access the content. So on the one hand, we have all this assistive technology embedded in our hardware, in our operative systems of our mobiles and a computer. But on the other hand, we need content to be accessible and to be compatible with these assistive technologies. If I'm a blind person and I do have a screen reader because I bought an iPhone, I need that the content of the web be compatible with my screen reader, and that's the part of web content accessibility is. So as Shadi said, we have economic and social benefits from accessibility. And we talk about position and digital marketing. All the big companies and applications are now about how many clients we have through the net, how many clicks on our application, how many viewers do we have. So all the companies, all the marketing, digital marketing companies are focusing on attracting clients, but they are not thinking about a huge amount of potential buyers or potential users that are persons that are using assistive technologies. So the impact of using of having accessible website is a very good for business in general. It's good because it have more profits than losses, because an accessible website is a cheaper website, because an accessible website will put your brand will be a very much position in your brand, easier to maintain, increase market share. All these long tail market that we're all facing, it's an enormous market where we do not have competition and people are there waiting to buy, waiting to use your information. We had an example in Mexico where the first supermarket that had launched an accessible website had an increase of 30% of their online sales, because people were willing to buy online but weren't able to buy online because the website were not accessible. So there's a very big market share that can be get by the first ones that will offer an accessible website. It also has social responsibilities, of course. Government for all the government websites now in most of the countries are obliged to have accessible websites, but the problem is in the implementation. Even though we have laws that oblige governments to have accessible websites, the implementation is taking too long. And why the implementation is taking long? Because we need that organization and people with disabilities, an organization that works for persons with disabilities, oblige government to comply with their obligation of having accessible websites. What are the best practice around the world to implement accessible website? First of all is monitoring. So we do have laws. We have laws that oblige government to have accessible website, but how can we know if those websites are accessible or not? Part of the things or the knowledge that we want to give through these workshops is to know how to perceive and how to test in a very easy way if a website is accessible or not. Of course, if you're a user a blind person that are using screen readers, you will know if a website is accessible or not. If you have a mobility problem and you do not surf the net using the mouse, or you surf the net using keyboard, you will very easily find out if the website is accessible or not. So what we want to show you through this workshop is how to know if a website is accessible or not, and if it's not accessible, how to raise your hand and ask the government, look, this is not an accessible website, so what do you want me to do with this information if I cannot access the information? So monitoring is super important to really know what is happening in accessibility. No? So we have to create a monitoring body who will give us updated information on what are accessible websites or not. Also, building capacities. Universities should show their developers what the standards on accessibility are. And we did a quick search in Latin America where we looked at the syllabus of 300 universities. And in the architectural careers, they were showing some standards on accessibility of the space. But on the development and computer programs syllabus, there were no mention on accessibility standards. So it's super important to have universities, to really compel with the universities to show developers what the web content accessibility standards are. That's why we love to have this kind of workshop in universities. I don't know if someone from the American University of Cairo is here, but it's super important that the syllabus on development have some mention on what web accessibility standards are. So the best practice around the world is universities, well, I put up the Mexican case, but also in Latin America, universities that are including in their syllabus some knowledge of web accessibility. So developers and computer science students, that when they go out in the market and search for a job, they have some knowledge of what web accessibility is. And maybe you do not have a whole course on accessibility standards, but I do believe that if students know what web accessibility is, that the web accessibility standards exist, because sometimes they don't even know that there's a thing, they don't even know that web accessibility standards have been created. So only to have the knowledge that web accessibility standards exist and where to find them, I think they will have a very big improvement on digital accessibility. Monitoring and auditing. Of course, how to evaluate a website, how to evaluate if a website is accessible or not, is very important body of knowledge. That's why we have experts and consults which showed us why a website is accessible or not. But I think that we need to set the standards and universal knowledge of what we can accept as an accessible website. No? So monitoring and auditing is a very important body of stakeholder that needs to be developed in each country. Also the promotion, and for the promotion it's super important to have organizations that are advocating for digital accessibility. We did in Mexico, and what we did was an experience, but we have very nice results. We created a ranking that we were created in a university in a classroom. We sat with 15 computer science students, and we said, well, let's evaluate and create a ranking on different government websites. And we created the ranking, and we published the ranking. And the ranking had so much result, because even though government did not know about web accessibility, we had government agency calling us, I want to be #1 in the ranking of, I don't know what the ranking is, but I want to be #1 in the ranking. So it helped us to create awareness and to create this kind of competition on who is implementing digital accessibility and who's not. So having the promotion, the diffusion of the standards, and creating a ranking, normally in our experience has very, very good results. So this national capacity building was created by the ITU in order to create an ecosystem. The thing is, when we talk about accessibility, normally either we are talking to the 4 or 5 persons in each country that have heard about accessibility, the 3 or 4 government officials that are preoccupied because they need to implement web accessibility, but there's no ecosystem. So if we need really to create an ecosystem. So when we have to create an ecosystem from zero, we need to create the demand side, and we need to create the supply side of accessibility. From the demand side, NGOs are the more important partners. They are representing the user, they're representing the consumers, and they are the ones that need to help and raise hands, and we need to have web accessibility. So once the NGOs really raise their hands, and also from the government side, the politicians create the policies, we will have the demand side. We will have government sites that need to have accessible website. We will have consumers that will ask for the right to have digital accessibility. So once we created the demand, we need to create the supply side. So we need to create development agencies. We need to create digital marketing companies that know how to provide what the demand is asking, that know how to provide accessible websites and know how to provide accessible content. So we need to create the flow of the demand as well as the supply side of the equation so we can have an ecosystem. So the program focus on that, focus on creating capabilities from the supply side, where we're going to, through these workshops, show developers how to implement the guidelines, how to implement accessibility in their website. But on the other side, we want to foster the demand through the summit that we're going to have tomorrow morning. So the buy-in of the political members, so they can really create policies that foster an ecosystem of accessibility. And then how to create a long-term accessibility policies is through the famous model. Because even though accessible ICTs will change the life of persons with disabilities, it will foster their economic and social development. Some of them do not know how to use assistive technology. So we need to create funds so persons with disabilities will get this assistive technology, will know how to use assistive technology, and really now can use all the information that we can get through the internet. So part of the model is thinking about creating this ecosystem and giving you the tools to create the ecosystem. So as I was saying, we need to create the laws. Once we create law, we need to create the policies that will foster the demand side. And then we will foster the supply side. Once there's demand for something, the supply side will always come. So we'll foster the supply side of an ecosystem of accessibility. And at the end, everyone will benefit. It's what Shadi was saying. Everyone will benefit because it's not only a human right, but all of us benefit from an accessible content. So that's the idea of the program. As Karim showed you in the morning, this is the idea of the model, and what we're going to do after the coffee break in the rest of the session is going deeper in the web content accessibility guidelines, so you can either implement them if you are a developer or know how to recognize an accessible website, and you will have enough information to show your peers or the technical and development persons in your organization to create an accessible website. So we will take a coffee break right now, and after the coffee break we will continue with the more technical workshop on web content accessibility guidelines. Thank you. I think the coffee break is just outside, no?
I think we'll go.